my neck. So of course, when I look at that, that's all I see is that my neck was like that. So yeah, nobody really likes it. But on the other hand, the weird thing about it is that sometimes it demands that what we do demands that we watch ourselves because it is a visual medium. So you kind of have to know where you are in the frame, where the frame is, what's going on. It's not just about feeling something. There's an actual architecture to it.
Do you watch dailies? Do you get behind the monitors ever? I
don't like dailies because by then it's done, it's over. You can't do anything to correct it. But I do like playback because I like to look through the lens. Like I said, I like to see where the shot is. I want to know where I am. I like to see storyboards. I want to know where I am in the shot, how it's framed, what all the, I want to know what all the camera moves are. I want to know how they're telling the story visually, because then that helps me when I do my work. But afterwards, who cares? I've done, it's, ugh, yeah.
Now, for a scene like this comes, this is the beginning of the moment where you and Mark start to form a different kind of relationship.
Yeah.
When you're in that scene, when you're in that moment, are you thinking about are you thinking about the script, what comes later?
Yeah, you have to. But for me, the important thing in this scene is that, poor Jules, she doesn't have anything to hang herself on, her persona. She's in this place where she's been a mom and a partner and whatever, and for the first time she's saying, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to talk about landscape design. And what happens to her is that this guy validates her. Like, it's shocking. She's rambling on about this and that and everything, and this guy just says, like, yeah, I like that. And no one said that to her in years. So what does that mean to a person? When do you, so you're trying to think, like, well, where's the germ of the affair? Like, what does he do? What happens to her that makes her suddenly, that makes a person turn towards somebody else?
Aside from him just being Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, but she's gay,
right.
Remember?
There's that.
So, yeah, I know. But, yeah. But for me, it was so important that he's so unbelievably validating that for her, that's what it was about. It's about having somebody just say yes to her all the time instead of saying, honey, do you think you can do that? I don't know, So yeah, so in that sense, I'm thinking, in that scene, I'm thinking, where do I find that moment that allows me to get to the affair?
And the other thing that's interesting about this, so we've talked about this before, is the language is very colloquial.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that you liked about it. And this movie is how people talk and how they interact with one another. And it comes off in that scene, it's so casual. It really seems off the top of your head.
Right.
Is it exactly verbatim what Lisa wrote, or do you have liberties?
We had some, in that scene in particular, because Mark and I know each other really well, there were definitely liberties. And the whole thing about, when I look at you, I see my kid's expressions, and he went, and I said, yeah, like that, like, and he went, So that was all made up. That was all improv. But the stuff, the stuff previous was in the script. So there was a mixture of stuff. But yeah, we were deliberately colloquial.
Is that how you like to work, to have that freedom to kind of improvise a little bit with their scene partner?
It depends. It depends on the, I really like language, and I want a script to be there. One thing I can't stand is when I see a script that says, we hear them fighting off stage. And I'm like, thanks. I'm like, yeah, I'll get right to that. I'm going to write it down and come and give you that scene off stage so that you can, that makes me nuts. Because I'm like, that's not fair. That's not fair. You need to have the language. It's important. It's just not, what people say is not just noise. So I do want to have that, and I want the script, I want the structure, but you want to have a little bit, sometimes with certain things you would like to have a little bit of leeway. If somebody comes out and says, hey, that's not what I wrote, it depends. Because there are people who do work that way, who are very specific with their language, and you respect that too, and you go, okay, but then you realize that they're looking for a certain kind of I don't know, that just that kind of meaning is important to them, and that's fine.
Well, with Lisa, because she wrote and directed it,
Yeah.
she was there to sort of
Yeah.
crack the whip if she needed to.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and she knew, and then we all respected the language very much. And as I said, you know, it was scripted that way. There were little kind of things in there. Mark always says, too, that one of the things that Lisa does that's wonderful is that she lets the camera roll for a while. You know, she kind of lets people breathe, and things will kind of come up. And she doesn't have, she's not so insecure that she feels like we're going to take her thing and run away with it. You know, she lets everybody kind of participate that way.
Are you ever self-conscious acting goofy in a movie?
Am I ever self-conscious?
Yeah.
Period? Yes. I mean, you know, that's the whole trick with acting, is that we're all incredibly self-conscious. If we weren't conscious of ourselves, we'd almost be in a different, you know, different kind of neurological state. You know, it's interesting because when you talk about, you know, you talk about people with autism, they have a different kind of they're having a different kind of consciousness about their behavior, whatever. So if you are, you know, if you're a person, yeah, we're going to be hyper conscious of where we are, who we are, what we're doing in space, how close we're standing to another human being, what their tone of voice is, what the room is like. You know, there's a you know, we all have a hyper-awareness of how we are in the world, and then put yourself on a set, and that gets ratcheted up, like, you know, 100 times, I think.
Well, hopefully it does.
Yeah, hopefully, or, you know, yeah.
Right. So you've done award season stuff before.
Mm-hmm.
You've been a veteran of this. And you hold some distinctions, as we heard, of being one of the few people to be nominated for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. When you do a movie like this, an indie, what does an award mean for it? It
means a great deal to its distributor. That's really, I mean, it changes the landscape for the film. I mean, when you make a movie like this one for $4 million, you know, a lot of people, the question I get asked is, did you know that you're making such a great movie? Did you know this would happen for the movie you're making? And I was like, no, we didn't. You know, we were just hoping we get a distributor. You know, you make these little movies and you think, please, somebody pick this up. So when it starts to get attention, when it gets nice reviews and, you know, awards consideration, that kind of stuff, then newspapers become, you know, aware of it. Kind of people start to read about it. They want to go see it. They buy tickets. It transforms it. You know, a bad review in the New York Times of a small movie kills the movie.
I'm not responsible.
Yeah. But, you know, having been, you know, no, not you, Melinda, no. But having been making these movies for, you know, since the early 90s, because the New York Times is syndicated, that little review, even if it's a little one, it goes out everywhere, and that's the end of it. You know, so you're so independent film they're very, very review driven and awards driven.
Do you read reviews? Do you read your reviews?
I try not to. I used to.
That's what everyone says, but I don't believe it.
But you know what happens is that I've had that experience where everybody's like, oh, you know, the reviews have been great, and then I've been in the back of a cab, and there's been, and I look, and that's the one that's bad. You know, that's the one. Or that, you know, or they're all bad, whatever. But it's hard to avoid them. And then some people like to call you up and tell you about them, too. Which is, that's, you know, hey, I don't think you were bad in that movie. You're like, oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of this sort of career arc. You don't have to name any of your bad movies if they exist. I don't know if they do. But do you look back at work? I mean, when you make a movie, you have a script, you have a director, all these things line up. Hopefully you have co-stars that you like. But at the end of the day, you don't know, unless you're in the editing room, you never know what the movie is going to turn out.
No, you don't.
How it's going to turn out. So
you have to really, you know, it really is about the experience you have making the film. I mean, for me, as the older I've gotten and the more I've worked, I realize what really matters is that I'm working on material that I really want to work on with some interesting, talented people, and that experience has to be it. That's got to be, you know, and everything that comes afterwards is nice, but it can't be about that because you don't have any control there. You only really have control over the work that you do at the time that you're doing it.
So do you look at the choices that you're offered, or maybe even earlier in your career when you were doing bigger budget movies, studio movies, action movies, were you looking at those and thinking, well, I could be an action heroine, or did you just want the experience of being on a, such an enormous set with that kind of responsibility?
There's less control than you think, in acting careers. I mean, there may be a few people who are able to say, this is the way I want my career to go, and then the arc, I'm going to take this movie and that movie. I mean, basically, movies just come your way, and you're either like yes or no. I'll do it, I mean, so there were lots of them were like that. I'm like, I'll do that movie. That's okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And then now I'll do this movie, and then I'll do. And as we were saying backstage when they were introducing me, I couldn't remember half of the things they were talking about. I'm like, did I do that? Or, because there's always, I think. For all of us in our lives, we always have this kind of forward momentum. What you've done. Yeah, it's always sort of about thinking like, well, I'm going to do this. It was never about making really definitive decisions. I mean, except the fact that I was always really drawn to independent film, and there were filmmakers that I would seek out, and I started to realize there was something that I was getting out of it. There's something that I really wanted there.
Are you looking to I think we talked about this before, but are you looking to the stories that reflect your own family, or the kind of movies that you guys might want to go see?
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not sure what I'm looking for when I read a script. I know, I sort of feel like, well, I know it when I read it. I remember when I read Savage Grace, it was an independent film. It took a long time to get financed, and based on a true story, really dark, really scary, about these people who, it's kind of rich dilettantes, and eventually this woman, Barbara Backlund, was murdered by her son Tony, who was also at the time allegedly her lover. It was dark. It was so dark, and I was on vacation. And my daughter was tiny, like a couple of months old, and she was sitting next to me on the bed, and I'm reading this thing, and I was like, oh my God. And I mean, it was so far away from anything that was part of my life.